Today we'll be going through the procedures for using the Canon T5i camera and adjusting the settings on it so we can do some astrophotography. I'm going to describe this in a very slow method so that if you don't have the ability to actually look at your phone and see the slides while you're doing this, you can hopefully follow what I'm saying and find it on the actual camera in front of you. We'll start by turning the camera over and looking at the bottom of it. And on the underside of it, on the bottom right, there's a little latch that lets you open it and put a battery inside. When you slide that battery in, there's a little click as it gets into place, and then you can shut the door. You'll also need to use an SD card, a memory card, to store your photos. And the slide for that is on the right-hand side of the camera. You sort of use your thumb and put on the little bumps and pull that backwards and it should pop open. You can slide in an SD camera so the front of the SD card is facing the back of the camera. Push that in until it clicks into place and then close the door. Now, on this camera, we'll want to turn it on, and so the on switch actually goes from off to on to movie mode. So when you're flipping that switch, you only want to switch it halfway, not all the way to movie mode, but just enough to take it from off to on. And that is on the top right side of the camera. You should see a dial on the top of the camera. That dial has several letters and images on it. We're going to want to do all of our stuff in manual mode. And so we'll turn that dial until it's set to M for manual. We'll next adjust some of the features in the menu. We'll access that by hitting the menu button on the top left-hand corner of the back of the camera. When you press that menu button, there's several options that appear, and you'll notice little camera icons with 1, 2, and 3 dots, and you'll see little playback ones with 1 and 2 dots, and you'll see a little wrench representing configuration for 1, 2, 3, and 4 dots. Perhaps the first thing we should do is assuming that this camera memory card doesn't have anything valuable on it, you'll go and you'll clear off that memory card. You'll format the card. So you go to the first of the configuration menus, scroll down to the bottom, and hit Format Card. Then it will give you a warning telling you that all the data will be lost, and scroll down to hit OK, assuming you want to do that. In that second configuration menu, you want to set the date and time that it actually is, because you'll want to have that date and time on your images later. So do that by looking at your smartphone and setting it so that the time on your smartphone matches the time on your camera. In the fourth configuration setting, you'll scroll down and do Clear Settings. Now, that won't adjust the date and time, so you're fine there. But you want to clear all camera settings and hit OK on that. And then when you're done with that, hit Cancel, and it'll back out of that menu to the top menu. That ensures that if the previous user of the camera had set something up funny, that you'll have it in the default settings. Now we might need to go back and adjust the image quality. And so our image quality in that first camera setting, we want to set to RAW plus large. And so that'll create a large JPEG image, but also a RAW file that stores a lot of different brightnesses and not just scaling everything to be an integer between 0 and 255. In our third camera setting, since we're going to be taking some long exposures for astrophotography, we'll want to scroll down and we may want to have the long exposure noise reduction on. Now, you may also want to test to see what it's like with this off, but when we turn this on, the camera will take an extra picture after it takes your picture and then subtract the real picture from this extra noise reduction picture to give you a slightly better picture. And so you can play with having that off or on. Another handy feature is in the screen menu, that fourth menu, is to enable touch shutter. That allows you to touch the screen in the back to trigger the shutter. There's a little bit less vibration when you do that, and so sometimes you want to just be able to touch the screen lightly to trigger the shutter. Now, very often we'll want to adjust and see all the different options on one screen. Hitting the Q button on the right-hand side, the second button down on the right-hand side of the camera, pulls up a menu that lets you see whether you're in manual mode or not, and then what speed, how fast the shutter is on the camera. It'll let you see what your f-stop is. In this case, it's 5.6, and it'll let you see what your ISO is, how sensitive the camera is in this case. For changing many of these, you'll notice that there's little yellow arrows scrolling left and right around, for instance, the shutter speed. And using the little wheel just behind the shutter button on top of the top right of the camera, you can scroll that left and right, and it'll change the time. Here we've changed the time from what it was before to 5 seconds by turning that wheel. For some of our astrophotography, in fact most of our astrophotography, we'll want to manually focus the camera because the camera sometimes has a difficult time seeing stars and focusing on them manually or automatically. And to switch from autofocus to manual focus, there's a little switch on the lens itself. And it's on the left side of the lens, and we'll switch it from AF to MF. If you haven't already, you'll want to pop the cap off of the lens. So to take that lens cap off, put a little pressure on both sides of it, and that'll pop right off and let you see the lens. Be careful not to touch the lens itself. The default kit lens goes from a focal length of 55 down to a focal length of 18. For most of our shots, we'll probably end up using a focal length of 18, but you may adjust that. Now, as we're doing that focus knob, the focus knob is close to where you adjust the telephoto. It's at the very front of that lens. It's a thinner little wheel, and so you can turn that gently to focus in and out. For focusing, you may want to switch on the mode that lets you see the live mode on the screen. Rather than looking through the viewfinder, you can just see what's on the screen itself. So by pressing that button to bring it to the screen, which is just to the right of the viewfinder and just below the knob where that had the manual, pressing that little button brings up the screen and lets you see things up close. Or in live mode. You can zoom in on that by pressing the little zoom button. That's at the top, and those zoom buttons are on the top right of the back of the camera. Another thing that you can do is if you don't want any vibration due to pressing the shutter, even if you do the screen, you can set it so that there's a delay, either a 2-second delay or a 10-second delay. And to get to that delay mode, you can press the button to the left of the set button. And that'll let you choose if there's a self timer. And you can go with 10 seconds or 2 seconds, depending on your choice. You can also set it up such that there's a self timer and that it takes multiple shots afterwards, up to 10 shots. That's a handy thing if you want to get more than one photo of the same thing and add them later. So that's an option for the future. As the timer's going off, the little yellow light on the front of the camera will flash to give you a warning countdown. For a lot of your pictures in astrophotography, you'll want to use a high ISO, a high sensitivity. You'll want to at least use 1600, very likely, but you might use 3200 or 6400. You can access that by pressing the ISO button on top of the camera and then selecting from the menu which one you want to use. You might also adjust the white balance by pressing the WB button on the bottom right of the camera, and then choosing whether you want a white balance of 4000 Kelvin or 7000 Kelvin or 5200 Kelvin. This gives you a slightly redder, slightly bluer image in your JPEG. And so choose the option that's appropriate for that. Something that's handy if you end up using the telescope to point up and it's at an angle where it's difficult to see the screen is that this screen will pop out to the left and then swivel around. And so you can move that out to the left if you need to. When you're done, be sure to put the lens cap back on. Be sure to take the SD card back out before you return the camera. Take the battery out and place it all in the bag that you got it in when you checked it out. And that's your introduction to some of the basic features of the Canon T5i that we'll be using for astrophotography.